Woo, there we go.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What's happening in the world?
Well, other than Dr. Kate and having two assistants who want to beat each other up.
Oh, no.
You know, that's always fun times.
Oh, it is. I've told you the story. And I'll tell you the school. I know you remember, I don't know if you remember him or not, the principal. But there was a principal at an elementary school in Charlotte who had a teacher and a teacher assistant who were just like cats and dogs every day. And so he invited them to his office and he set them down side by side, you know, the principal's desk and the two chairs across from it. And he set them down side by side and said that he was going to get to the bottom of this. And so James said, teacher, you go first. And so the teacher, you know, spent about 10 minutes telling him what a scumbag the teacher assistant was. And he got through with that and said, so he looked over at the teacher assistant and asked her, said, well, tell me what your perspective of this issue is. And she proceeded to start to tell what a scumbag the teacher was, and the teacher jumped up and slapped her right out on the floor, right there in the principal's office. Oh, but wait, it gets better. And so the principal's action, and seemed to be former principal's action, was instead of calling the police and you know, because the teacher assaulted the teacher assistant, he simply told the teacher assistant to go back to class, and if she called the police, that he'd fire her. She couldn't wait to get to the magistrate's office to file a complaint. She left before the end of the day to file a complaint at the magistrate's office. So we had to get a new principal and a new teacher. But yeah, so hopefully it won't get to that point. But yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. That was at Villa Heights, by the way.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I remember that principal.
Villa Heights. Slapped her right out on the floor. It's kind of hard to deny when she got to the magistrate's office. She had a big hammer on the side of her face. Wasn't a lot of denying that. So yeah, that didn't go well for us. We had to pay some money over that.
I bet so.
Yeah, that's the way the world works. If you have people who do bad things and you don't follow the law, then that negligence falls back on you as a principal and as a school district. And see, that's the thing that we probably not talked enough about. We've talked about personal liability. We've talked about negligence. Misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance, as we're moving into that, you're going to be moving to that pretty quickly. But you got to understand that you're not only personally liable, but you expose your district to the liability as well. And so you'll get sued and lose your house, but they'll also have to pay a bunch of money. So that never goes well for you. In the business, we call it protecting the shield. You can't do things that are going to expose your district to liability lawsuits. You know, if you want to sabotage your own career, that's one thing. But the district frowns upon you doing things that make them look bad, especially in the paper. That's just one of those things to know. I want to call out, welcome, good evening. Hope everybody's doing well. You should be, everybody should be wrapping up task 1 of the OMA. Make sure you do your one peer review of one of your partners. Most of you have already moved into OMA 2. Let me look at the screen here. There's Cammie. Cammie turned in an OMA 2 today that I looked at, and specifically it's in discussion board. You all should look at it. We had some question about what that professional development plan should look like and how involved it should be. It should be the standard graphic organizer format. Cammie has a really good one. It's very highly developed. Trust me, you're going to thank me when you get to 6.0 When you get to 605 and you have to do your SOP, which is putting all of these first 5 evidences together into a school improvement plan like a principal would do, when you get to SIOP task 5, you're going to have to put together a graphic organizer of your school improvement plan. It's going to take each one of these graphic organizers that you have done. Now, I know you're not nearly as old as me, but you will sleep between now and then. And if you have to go back and build out this graphic organizer a year later, it will not go well for you. You're talking about, you can do it now. Most everybody has got theirs in a graphic organizer, but make sure it's in that standard format of our standard graphic organizer, you know, specific activity, person responsible, summative, formative assessment, indicator of success, goal, all of those pieces, you know, your resources that you're going to need, make sure that you've got it in that format, because when you put this thing together at the end, it's got to be in one format, and it just rolls right down the list of, here is the working copy of the school improvement plan that a principal would have in their office, so they would know who's going to do what, where, when, and why. And if you don't have it in that standard format, you'll have to go back and convert it. And the further you get away from having done that, the harder it will be to remember all the particulars of how to put that thing together. So it's very important that you have that. So that's just a reminder. I'll also call out tonight, Heather, Cammie, Todd, Andrew, and Cyrus, who turned in their PowerPoint presentation. Thank you for that. I like it when they come in early enough that I can read through them. If they don't, that's fine as well, because but make sure that after tonight that you upload your final presentation in the Dropbox. Let me share my screen. You have two tasks, and remember, everybody's got to upload the same version. One person can't do it for everybody. So when we go to where we have here, case studies drop boxes, your group assignment, your PowerPoint, you got 4 of them, and then you have a half-page reflection that you will write after class tonight. You will write that, and you will upload it there, and I will grade it. Now, that reflection, I always get asked, what should I put in that reflection? Whatever you want to put. What did you take away from it? It could be about working with your group. It went well, it didn't. You know, I'm working with people that wasn't easy to work with, or my group was wonderful. What you've taken away from the process of doing this collaborative case study that produced a product. Remember, we're moving up into higher level activities now. In the past, when we came on Zoom and you came on your groups, you were just sharing information. Now you had to Zoom in order to produce a product, and now you will have to present that product. So again, a little higher level each semester, but whatever you learned or whatever you took away from the case study process that you've been involved in the last 2 weeks, that's what I want to know. You can tell me. Now remember, these go into a Dropbox. Only I see them. So if it's not gone well, you need to share that with me. If it's gone well and you've learned something, I want to know that as well. All right. So I think I've covered all the notes that I had. A lot of good work this week. Saw a lot of good things. We are on track as where we need to be with it seems like our discussion boards are going great. Our tasks are doing fine. Most everybody's through with task 1. Everybody's in task 2. Remember, it's a copy and paste. Several of you have already hit task 3. So I think we're where we need to be for week 4. We're coming up on our 5th session will be halfway. It'll be a little less than halfway of our time. But please remember, we only have 10 sessions, and so we're already on our 4th session. So 2-week notice in 2 weeks. Case study 2 is due in 2 weeks. So I'm giving you your 2 weeks normal notice tonight that in 2 weeks on Zoom session 6, you will owe us another case study night. All right. So which group said we're going to go first this week?
We did.
Well, somebody share their screen and kick us off here. Let's get this party started.
Hey, Heather, you want to share the screen?
I can't share until Dr. Lamb stops sharing.
All right, let me stop my share. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
You got to remind me, I need to stop my share and stop my video, and it'll make yours work better.
Okay. Are you guys seeing it?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I can't see you anymore, so
You want to hit present?
yeah, I just can't see you guys, so it's okay.
Can you see it on your screen?
Yeah, I can see my screen. I just can't see you guys, so no big deal.
That's, folks usually desire that when they're working with me, but that's another story for another day. Thanks for pointing that
All
out
right.
too.
So case study 1, will cheating strike out Bobby? All right, so we had all our initial reactions and thoughts and questions that we had a long discussion Sunday evening. We got together and had a Zoom meeting, and before we actually addressed question 2 and 3, we just kind of put out all of our thoughts that we had and had a really lengthy discussion about some things. And as you guys can see on the screen, some of the things that we agreed on and some of the questions that we came up with. Some of the agreements was that, obviously the student did cheat in the situation, that it seemed like some politics can obviously affect decisions that are being made. The teacher is unyielding, wants to feel supported. That was evident, by them bringing in their union representative. And then also we brought up the fact that the use of the word may in the policy seemed to be a big issue that we talked about a lot, preventing it from being a zero tolerance policy. Some of the questions that we had after reading through the case study was, is it appropriate for one assignment to carry such weight? We didn't know the other students' grades. Was it just this one grade affecting the student, or were there other grades that could possibly have been bringing their overall grade down? Where the policy says the grade is assigned by the teacher, this does not mean that the principal cannot change if needed. Was the student's first violation? Why did the teacher automatically go to the union representative? What manner? We talked about the manner in which the teacher interrogated the student. Can the teacher be completely impartial? And what are the grading practices, policies, things in the handbook, the faculty handbook that are actually mentioned, because obviously none of that was in the case study as well. So a lot of questions we had, things that we did not know, but there were several things that we all did agree on. And so I'm gonna go ahead and flip to the next screen. So question 2 that we were to address was, what should the principal's course of action be? Be sure to address the issues of due process and arbitrary and capricious standards. So Cyrus, I'll let you go first and talk about one of the things that you brought up related to this question.
One of the first things that came to my mind was the principal needed to just talk with the student himself. He needed to figure out, he's heard from the dean, but he now needs to hear from the student and give the student a chance to explain themselves. Because one of the things that was mentioned in our discussion was the manner in which the teacher interrogated the student. It seemed, obviously can't talk. It seemed pretty confrontational. And so the student could have felt pressured to have responded in a particular way. So we thought it was really important to allow the student that opportunity to just speak with someone who was not the teacher, because just to ensure as much fairness as possible. And then my next thought was that he needed to consult what the student handbook. So what did the student and the parent agree to at the start of the year? But also, what were the grading practices set forth by the board and set forth by the teacher? And were the teacher's practices compliant with what was set forth in the board policy? All right, Drew, you ready?
All right, so Yep, I'm good. So, one thing when I looked at this, I mean, just with in my profession in PE and stuff like that, I want to look at talk with the student, try to understand what's really going on. Are you really taking athletics more important than you are school? Are you putting that? Because at the end of the day, that is secondary to what education will do. And as athletic director, I tell all of my students and all of our athletes, the ball will stop bouncing at some point. We got to continue to put education at the forefront. So it's really just looking at that part from the student, trying to understand, why are you doing this? Is this your way of trying to make a name for yourself, or is there something going on at home that you really don't want to deal with? This is why you're really putting your emphasis on baseball and everything like that, rather than putting the emphasis on school and taking this assignment the way it should be done.
I guess I'm up next. I think it's kind of getting redundant how we said we taught the student, but I just wanted to point out that sometimes we give students in other areas more of a chance to explain themselves than we do our basic students. Like if they have an IEP or a 504, we spend more time asking them questions and to get to know what underlying issues cause them to do something. And I think that this was a moment in which that really wasn't made possible for the student. It didn't seem like, just because he answered very quickly. There's not enough information to tell if he was given more of a chance or time to respond to the question. But when he was asked if he cheated, he did admit to it. And then when they asked why, he said, it was time. So it is, that is true, but a lot of times students, will blame something else when there's really will blame an issue that's going on and not talk about something else that's in the background. So I know that in my classroom, sometimes a kid acts out and I can, get frustrated and go ahead and give them the punishment right there. But even my administrators know that I have like the lowest referrals of any teacher at my school, because I just don't write them. I take care of it myself. And it's just taking that time, that moment to step out in the hall and say, okay, what's going on? Because you can't be successful unless, we figure this out. So I want to work this out and help you out any way I can. So I felt like he wasn't given the due process in which he was able to explain himself through that. And to maybe go over with him, like, okay, well, if that's going on, if you are making, sports more of a priority, then, maybe we can give you some suggestions about time management in order for you to figure out a way to balance these things, because it is student athlete. It's not athlete student. So you could emphasize that with him about being a student comes first, and then the athlete is secondary to that. I mean, I had 3 kids who one played 5 sports in 1 year. So I know that it's challenging, but it can happen. So that's just where I was at, just more of a talking and seeing what's going on, giving him that due process, because I didn't feel like it was given to him.
Okay, and for myself, I was looking more at a future course of action, and how the principal could, further address this issue. And I feel like this is something that would definitely need to be taken to the leadership team, the SIT team. They need to look at their policies and their student handbook. One thing we brought up in our discussion Sunday night was, is this teacher's policy a solo policy, or is this a school's policy? Are they matching the district's policy? Is there something that needs to be addressed that would change in the handbook? And it seems like there should be, obviously, for this one assignment to count so heavily to affect the student's grade the way it did. So it sounds like there needs to be some revisions that need to be made. And again, are they aligned with whatever the expectations are for the entire school or for the district? Another thing I brought up was the assignment itself. The assignment did not seem like anything that had a lot of meat to it, I guess I would say. It didn't seem like it really aligned with what the curriculum would be or the state standards. So why is this one assignment carrying so much weight? I don't know that this is an assignment that has any sort of evidence of learning for the class. It was just a simple interviewing assignment, talking to some of the seniors in the community. So it just doesn't seem like that it should have had that much weight to cause a student to fail. But then again, it does go back to the question of what was the student's grades prior to this point? Were they carrying a higher grade and this one assignment caused them to fail, or were they already at a point of, being on the borderline of failing because they had just not done the work all year long because of baseball? Right. Todd?
Yeah, and in talking what Heather was just saying about the grades moving forward, was the student like barely hanging on and then this tanked them? We also looked at the fairness of what about all the other kids in her class that, we're looking at one kid because he's entitled enough and he has a parent that's like really looking out for him and talking and bringing it to the forefront. There are other kids that their GPA might have dropped, or they might have dropped under AB honor roll because they dropped to a C in this class because of it. As we were going, I was going last, and we were trying to come up with new things. We all agreed that we should talk to the student probably to begin. But the issue was, as I was reading, like on page 166, it says that when students admit guilt, there's no requirement for any more fact finding in the hearing. But we all agreed that like when the student was spoken to, he did admit guilt, but then that was it, other than like baseball, and we felt like the kid really did not have that chance to speak. So I wanted to kind of like push that back out there as well. The fact, everything else on my list that's there was things that Dr. Lamb said that seemed to like just be echoing in my head while we were meeting. And that was backed up in the reading, such as that we could all be sued, and we can all, at that point, I was like I'm in the wrong degree program. I'm going to lose my house, but in reading, it says that students must prove actual injury before any substantial compensation or monetary award is allowed in federal courts over situations. And then you could say, well, he's not getting a scholarship maybe because of this or whatever. But later on, the Texas Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of their earlier ruling that said that there is no fundamental right to participate in extracurricular activities in high school, and that colleges can't, or the promise of scholarships really can't be the determining factor in this. So as we were coming down to my answer at the end here, we have two issues really on the table instead of one. I know it's a Billy question, but we had two. And one was Billy cheated, and we know Billy cheated, but the other one is why he cheated and what he cheated on and the effect of it and the fairness of the result. I went back to Dr. Lamb saying teachers don't assign grades. The reason I asked a question last class about that was because when I was in Florida, we used to flip our gourd all the time over principals wanting to change our grades. And we had unions, and we were always saying, well, we can take it to the union. You're not changing our grades, blah, blah, blah. But when he said it was a national law last week, I was just like shocked. And it kind of stuck in my head, teachers don't assign grades, principals do. In fact, so much I texted my principal during class, why do you fail so many kids? But in the end, in this case, principals make that call. The error is really in the grading policy. The kid did quit, but the grading policy is the problem here. And there's a chance to teach, the teacher, and there's a chance to make things right. So as we move forward into the next slide, we're really interested in the relationships between the teacher and the principal. Why did the teacher bring the union rep right off the bat? Is it a bad situation to begin with? The kids seem to admit it to the teacher. So the kid doesn't seem to have such a bad relationship with the teacher, but then why did the teacher use it against the kid so harshly? So kind of seeing what's going on, with that moving forward. Heather, you can advance, please. We broke this down. We put this slide up, and we each kind of like attacked, these as we saw going through the justice, the critique, profession, and care. We felt that the grade itself was not, giving a 0 is fine, especially if that's in your policies or whatever. But the amount of credit that the one assignment was worth, like how could say a fourth quarter one assignment, how can that fail you for the entire year? If it's a quarter score, if it's a final exam, how can that exam be worth more than the percentages that our final exams are worth? Those are dictated already for us. So it seems pretty unfair to have that kid have to do that. You guys want to jump in on another one?
Well, I know we, like Todd said in the previous slide, each of our questions that, how we would address or how the principal should address the situation did look into each of these paradigms. So we felt like they all definitely relate to this case, moving forward. And I think, we pretty much kind of covered each thing separately. I'm gonna go ahead and flip to the next slide.
Yeah.
So this was just a little bit of a summarization of what we thought the principal's actions should be to ensure the student's due process rights are not violated. Obviously, the principal needs to speak with the student. We all agree that that due process was not evident in this particular case study. After speaking with the student, the principal needs to review the grading practices and policies of school and the district. It is important that the principal speak with the teacher. We did have a little bit of a conversation about, whether the principal should address the policy right away with the leadership team and then basically send out, a blanket email or a blanket statement saying everybody has to make sure their grading policy looks, like X, Y, Z. And I think it was Cammie that brought it up and said that, no, like, it's probably one of the most hated things is when you get these blanket emails, when you know that there's a particular teacher or a group of teachers that needs to be addressed individually. And so, she was saying, make sure that the principal should speak with the teacher first and give that teacher an opportunity to have a conversation and then take, the information to the leadership team to revise and revisit and look at the grading policies itself. And then also, the principal needs to notify the student and the parents about the decision. And regardless of the outcome, the principal needs to bring the issue of the grading practices again to that leadership team. So this is definitely something that could easily come up again as an issue. And I think we said that we were surprised maybe that it had not before, that this teacher had not already had an issue where a student failed in the end, and maybe they had. They're just speaking about this one case study, and that was something that we also said in our conversation Sunday, was that the case study just gives you the bare minimum facts of information. We didn't have enough of a backstory, so we could have a lot of assumptions and what ifs that we just don't know, what all the details are surrounding the story. So, kind of formulating our own ideas and theories based on what we're given, and it could really kind of go many different directions. But if we had more information, then we could probably get to a more specific answer of how things should be handled or why they should be handled a certain way versus another way. Does anybody want to add anything else?
Well, I mean, on the two sides of this, we felt like Bobby really should still be punished for cheating. And if the result, like we all have different, I guess, procedures in our own schools that we talked about. And as we were talking about, well, what should his punishment be? But in this case, it should be whatever the schematic of that school is. And if it's a 0, the issue going back to it being the weight of the assignment, Bobby should get the 0, but the principal assigns grades. So, before giving Bobby the 0, he or she should call the teacher in and have that discussion about, like, tell me what the assignment was. Tell me if the assignment, because we questioned how much it attaches to the social studies or civics. What do you call it? What marks does it hit in, because they were just interviewing like elderly people or whatever. And so, is she teaching the right things? Is she following like the legal rules of the school as far as assignments and what they are weighted as. Even if the teacher's wrong, which it seems like it is, there needs to be a discussion of that. If the teacher changes the weight of the assignment to fit the law and to be correct, if Bobby still fails because Bobby was on the borderline of failing anyway, then he fails because he's been a struggling student all along. But most of our policies indicate that on a first offense, which we are assuming this is, Bobby would be able to redo this or do an alternative assignment. So there's still a way out. So there's kind of two issues going on, but really that teacher needs to like be, I don't know, like mentored a little bit to see what she's done. She might not even realize what she's doing. She's so mad about the cheating that she might not realize, you know, that what she's doing is too punitive. Anybody else?
All
Well,
right.
and
so-
we did talk about that. We did need to make sure that the teacher also needed to be given a chance to be spoken to, because, you know, there's many times where we're asked to follow rules within our system. And then when a student goes before a principal, then the principal overrides that very rule that he asked us to, or he or she asked us to follow, to follow. So that might have been why she was angry, was because she was like, well, here's another rule and I wanted to follow it and back me up on this. And then that could have been a moment where he could have, took her to the side and found a resolution that would meet both. Because it does go against, if we're looking at the substantive and the procedural, it kind of goes against those, the free and equal, and also the right to that due process, in which that really isn't a fair education, free and equal education.
Okay. So if you'll go back to your first page.
Is that the one you want, Dr. Lamb?
That would be your title, your first page.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
No,
There's
that's still your title slide. There you go. All right.
Okay, it must not have been catching up.
Okay, so I'm going to dive in here and then I'm going to call on our resident principals and they'll dive in after me. I'm going to take a couple of these and then I'm going to let them take some of these. All right, so let's understand, this case is about due process. Everybody gets that. It's about due process. It's about substantive, excuse me, it's not about substantive due process. It's about procedural due process. And what is the difference? Substances is what are the laws and policies of the state and the district. That's what the substance is. Procedure is how they're carried out. This is a due process procedural case. Now, not to be a contrarian or not to be ugly, but you had more than enough information to make decisions. All of life, we wish we had more information. This case study has plenty of information to make your decisions, because it's not about substantive due process. There is a policy on grading in North Carolina, South Carolina. All states have a policy on grading. I pulled one up at random earlier today, and I'm going to share my screen. We're going to come back to this slide, by the way. I'm going to see if I can do this. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to come back to this one. I pulled this one up at random. Let me see. Let me switch browsers here. Okay, right here it is. All faculty handbooks have this in there, and their expression of the state and the district substantive policies on grading. And this pretty much is the same nationwide, but it is in North and South Carolina, I can tell you that. And this is what it says. Major assessments, at least 30, no more than 60. Now, what that means is, and that is exams, state exams in North Carolina count 30%. And all the rest count the other 30% at that level, or up to 30 more. Minor assessments such as class activities, quizzes, and short terms, they can only count 10% of the grade each. Homework no more than 10 and participation no more than 10. That's standard throughout North and South Carolina. That's actually the law. That's set by the State Board of Education. So the notion that was he close, that maybe if he was close, if you make one assignment, which all the assignments for the year can only count 10% for the entire year, maximum. If you make one assignment count more than 50%, it doesn't matter what his grades were before, he's got to fail. I can do that math without having to take my shoes off. I can count that math on my hands. That if we give him a 0 on half of, or over half of the course, the most he can make for the year is a 49. Let me say that again. If we make one assignment count more than 50%, let's say it's 51, even if he has 100 average on everything else for the year, his yearly average would be 49. So also understanding the concept of double jeopardy. Our handbook says what we can give this child in terms of his punishment. And it's anywhere from a conference to 1 day of in-school suspension. If we give him that, we can't give him the 0 as well. But even if we gave him the 0, it can't fail him for the year. It can't be weighted enough to fail him for the year. And so this is not about policy. The policy's in place that everybody has to follow. What this is about is the teacher did not follow the policy. Now, you can say, well, maybe we need to have a discussion with, there's nothing to discuss. Grading policy is in the faculty handbook, just like this one is at every school in both the states that we cover. The faculty handbook has the district's grading policy in it. If you'll look at the syllabus for this course, it's got Gardner-Webb's grading policy in it, and it's got the points that you have to make in this course. That's a requirement. That's not just a good practice. That's a requirement, because if not, we're subject to lawsuit on from the Office of Civil Rights and equal opportunity. There's so many lawsuits that opens you up for. Your policy, your grading policy, and your points, all that is expressed before the course ever starts. So this is not about the teacher didn't know. And then one of the things I like, Cammie pointed out, don't punish the many for the sins of the few. Don't email everybody or put a note up in the faculty lounge or whatever. If you've got a problem with the teacher, you deal with that teacher directly. But this case is not about the teacher not knowing. This is not really about the grade or any of those things or Bobby paying athletics. This is about, we had a policy in place. The teacher decided to go outside of that policy. The teacher decided to go outside of that policy, went rogue. What are you going to do? She did not follow the procedure. There is a lack of, you're right, there's no due process here. You can't be judge and jury. If you suspect a kid is cheating, you can't meter out the punishment. Now, the word said in this case said the kid may fail. It doesn't say that they may fail for the year. It says they may fail the assignment. If it says they fail for the year, that would be a 0 tolerance. But even then, if they may fail, if our handbook said we could give them a 0 on the assignment, or we can punish them. Everybody's handbook says if you punish them, you got to give them some kind of an alternative assessment. That's what we call restorative justice. So when you do your due process question, you'll notice I'll say our goal in North and South Carolina, as stated by the legislatures, Department of Education, say that our first duty is to restorative justice. You will not find a court that would support you in giving this kid a failing grade. You're supposed to simply give them whatever your code of conduct punishment, which would be a day of in-school suspension. But we don't fail kids over cheating. We don't give them failing grades. We may punish them, we may give them a consequence, but it's not grade related. That's what restorative justice means. That we work toward restorative justice rather than being punitive with their grades in their future. I like what Andrew said. You know, athletics have to come second. Academics have to come first. Well, we can't do that if we're failing kids for cheating, for something that if we're using their grades or their academics as punishment. That's not a good thing. Yes, you're right. They don't have any right to athletics, but they do have a right to a free and appropriate public education. And putting him out of school for a year, even if you let him go to summer school, that would be considered capricious. That's too much punishment for this. The handbook does not allow for that. The handbook specifically says this is the grading scale. This teacher has stepped way. This assignment shouldn't have counted as less than 1 point on the yearly average, less than 1 point according to state law. She manipulated it to count more than 50%. Now, a veteran, even a beginning teacher knows better than that. It's right there in the handbook. It's right there in the handbook. So if we went just like, again, you've seen this, but I'll go back to this. You will see right here, here's the syllabus. This is a requirement. It tells you what the rules of the roads are. This guarantees you substantive due process. Now, if I step outside of this and just give you whatever grade I feel like, then you have a case you can sue me and the university, and you ought to. But you would be able to see here the course meeting times, all those things, everything that's required in here. It's got the grading policy, communication, all the standards that I'm required to hit for you. Here is the grading scale, and then I'm required to get out of that one. Close that one. Also, under the course overview, you will see right here, there's the points that goes along with that. I have to advertise that for every course. Now that changes according to whether it's spring, summer, or fall, according to the number of weeks. So it has to be right there. Now, if you get 2,600 points and I give you a C, you ought not be happy. But if you get 2,100 and I give you a B minus, that's what you earn. That's the way it works. Your job as a school administrator is to make sure that all policies are carried out as stated. If not, that's when folks have the ability to sue you and win. So due process has two parts. The organization will set up all the substantive. They'll make sure you have that stuff. If you're a principal of a school, just like our two resident principals, when they do their opening faculty meeting this fall, if they don't have a faculty handbook, that's on them and they'll lose their job. Because the district says you will have these things ready for them. And these are the things that you will enforce. Now, it's your job to make sure teachers carry out all those policies as stated. That's the procedural part. This teacher went off, completely rogue on us here. Assigned this grade, knew that she was assigning an illegal grade, but then went to her union rep for protection. That's what that tells you, that she knew what she was doing. She's trying to pressure the principal. Now, you'll remember, I'll stop my share. You'll remember when you were probably about 4 or 5 years old, your mother said to you, if your friend jumped off of the roof, would you jump off with him? That's what this is about. The teacher broke the law here in a big way. In a big way. This is, other than physically abusing a child, this is the worst thing you can do to a child. Let me say that again. Other than physically abusing a child, this is the worst thing that you can do, to deny them their educational right. Nothing you can do worse other than to physically abuse them. And so it's your job as an administrator to make sure that you understand that you can't go along with this and say, well, I'll support you when we meet with the parent, but boy, I'm gonna have a word with you later. No, you can't do that. Because she has forfeited her home doesn't mean that you have to forfeit yours. Because your 5-year-old friend jumped off the roof, wearing a tablecloth around his neck and thought he was Batman, doesn't mean that you have to do something that dumb as well. Again, these are the kinds of things when you do something this is malpractice. This This is under the negligence standard. This is malpractice. This is, you intentionally did something illegal for malice and then did it intentionally. This is not misfeasance. You did the wrong thing, didn't know any better, or nonfeasance. You didn't act. This is malfeasance. This is malpractice. You intentionally did something wrong and illegal in order to injure or harm someone. You did it intentionally, where you tried to deny this kid his right to a free and appropriate public education for an entire year. If you fail a kid, he is effectively excluded for a whole year. That would be a zero tolerance suspension. Is zero tolerance, is that legal? No, it is not legal. Why do you think the Office of Civil Rights makes you report it? It's absolutely illegal to say, if you do this, we put you out for a year. We exclude you for an entire year. We don't even do that for kids who bring handguns. And we're going to do that over a throwaway class assignment that probably is worth 1/10 of a point on the yearly grade. And we're going to make it count more than 51% or more of the yearly grade. That, again, is the equivalent of, me and Dr. Maraglia getting caught smoking and taking me out back and shooting me for smoking at school. That is the academic equivalent. So this case is not about the policies. It's not about the substance. It's about how the procedure, how this case, the due process was carried out, or in this case, the lack of that. So you have more than enough information to make this decision. If you understand that, when it says student may fail may get a failing grade, it's only on that assignment. But that may means if you do that, you can't give them the in-school suspension. But in North and South Carolina, we are working on restorative justice, which means we don't give them the failing grade on the assignment. We give them a makeup assignment, and we give them up to in-school suspension. Now, it matters if it's the first or second time, in that if it's the first time, we don't even usually give them in-school suspension. That's usually the second time. But it's according to what the code of conduct says in your district. That's where that range comes in. The minimum is for the first time. The maximum is for the second or subsequent time. You know how that works. I showed you that last week. When you're looking at a code of conduct and it gives a minimum and maximum, that the understanding is the minimum is for the first time. And so even if this was his 17th time cheating this year, he still couldn't get more than in-school suspension. You can't exclude him for it. So that's the notion here. So going over my notes. Again, this is an application, exclusion for the year, restorative justice, more than 50%. All right, I'm going to turn it over to our principal. I think I answered all the questions that was on your slide. I'm going to turn it over to our resident principal experts here for them to weigh in, and then we'll move on quickly to our next presentation.
Well, I just wanted to also point out that, as you said, with restorative justice, you get an alternative assignment and a consequence, but you're doing double jeopardy if you're saying that the kid can't play ball.
That is
correct.
correct.
That's not one of the possibilities.
That's correct.
That's laid out in the district discipline policy. So that's something that you also need to keep in mind. But this case is just a situation of compounding one error on top of another, because as Dr. Lamb's already said, you're looking at Office of Civil Rights wanting to take a look at what's going on here. And believe me, you don't want to deal with that. That is a complete headache. And you're also looking at a violation of local policy and state law. And so it's just one thing on top of the other. So at this point, the only thing that the principal can do is he's going to have to deal with the teacher and move forward. She's not going to be able to get what she wants out of this with her malice and her desire to hurt him. She's going to have to suck that one up, and then they are going to have to talk. You guys mentioned they're going to have a conversation, but the conversation is not going to be maybe what you were originally thinking. It's going to be, what are you going to do at this point? Because this teacher has given you a huge headache and potentially brought lawsuits. And so I've even heard Dr. Lamb say this is not somebody he would want to keep on his staff. And you're going to have a real heart to heart with yourself and with that teacher about, do you want somebody that's going to go rogue on you? So that's the dilemma you have now as a principal, is what am I going to do with this teacher? Not what am I going to do with the student? I know what I'm going to do about the student.
Student's the easy part.
Exactly.
So some things that I would suggest, that I do to kind of make sure some things like this do not occur. For me, in a high school level, each department has a consistent grading policy. I've tried to do the entire school. We're kind of the same, but I mean, for the entire school, we're definitely the same for the whole, each department is exactly the same. You are required to turn in your syllabus to me, of course. And so I look at those things to make sure your grading policy meets what our county policy is, and I make sure it's set up. I look at your grade book. I make sure it's set up like it should be. Another thing that nobody mentioned is when you are looking at grades, if you say that tests are 40% of your grades, then you need to make sure you're monitoring how many grades a teacher is given. If a teacher gives one test in a 9-week period, that's a lot. And so you need to look at those type of things. Like for me, I asked my data manager to run grades weekly. Why? Because I want to make sure, number one, teachers are putting in their grades, so parents aren't calling me wondering, how's their students' grades or what's going on or anything like that. And then number two, I'm making sure they have a good amount of grades in their grade book. For me, high schools are 6 weeks, so you should have no less than 4, usually 5 tests. You should not have one test that counts 40% of that student's grade. You shouldn't do that. That's a huge amount. What I'm saying to you is some things that you should look for as a principal to help you set up to make sure you don't have any of these things to happen. And also, I specifically say in my discipline matrix, if you give them a 0, don't turn it in for a discipline. That's not a discipline. You've done with it, move on. Don't write them up. That's it. So those are the things that I do to prevent something like this from occurring.
That would be double jeopardy,
Correct.
but a lot of districts are working, the notion is restorative justice. But one of the things Dr. Skaten said there, and I just showed you the point system that I talked about. In the MELS program, I make sure that we grade everything on a 100-point basis. But you will notice that there are at least 28 separate assignments for the summer. And during the regular year, the regular semesters, if in the add-on where they have 2 evidences, they have at least 45. Again, that way, if you miss one thing, it's not going to hurt you that bad. But again, as Dr. Skaten said, if we only have 1 grade for the whole grading period, that won't hold up in court. That's too punitive. It won't hold up in court that the whole grade is based on 1 activity for the semester or for the year. It won't work out. And so that's why you have to monitor these things as the principal. We have 5 modules in MELS 601, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you will take. We have 1, 3, and 5 for our add-ons. We have at any one time between 300 and 400 students in the program according to what semester it is. And we have between 21, 31, 41 instructors, but we have to make sure that every one of them, that their shell is consistent, they understand the grading and attendance policy, that it's the same for everybody, the point system. If you're in section C2 of 603 this summer, your grading points will be the same as if you're in section 4, 6, 8, 10, or 12. That's just the way it works. We have to be consistent among ourselves. And so that is the notion, is that the policy has to be in place, and all the organization enforces those. You are that enforcement wing to make sure that teachers are exposed to all these things, and they are. But then the bigger issue is, the procedural piece is do your folks carry it out as intended, or do they go rogue and kind of go off the map on you? And then what are you going to do? So you're very much correct. There's going to be a conversation between the principal and the teacher, but it's not going to be the kind you think it is. It's going to be about their future. and what you're going to do. Now, Dr. Miraglia said, this is a deal breaker for me. This person can't work for me. If I have to pull the custodian in and teach their class and have them sweeping floors, we're going to do that. They can't teach kids for me. You can't allow kids. If you allow kids to be treated this way in your building, you're in the wrong business. You are in the wrong business. Now, I told you last week, and this is coming to the end of the sermon here. I'll get down off my high horse. I freely admit Bobby might be a turd, pardon my language, whatever you want to call him. But you still don't treat kids this way. We can't do that. That's not the business that we're in. We are not running a penal colony here. This is public education, not a correctional institute. So we've got to always remember that. Although many times they look like one another, that's not what we do. The purpose of why we have our doors open every day is not to punish kids. All right. Excellent. All right, who's our next group? And you can share your screen and get started.
We are.
Go
We
right
are.
ahead.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Can everybody see it?
Yes. All right, can you go to this next slide? Ashley?
Sorry, I'm on the next slide. I don't know if there's a delay, so I can't see anything like Heather said.
All I'm seeing is the first slide.
It's nice though.
There it is.
Let me turn my camera off and see if that'll help anything internet-wise. Oh, it's not on anyway. It automatically turns it off. Okay.
It popped up right before you exited presentation
Yeah.
mode.
All right. All right, so the background, I think we've established that. Bobby was caught cheating. He admitted to using his brother's work. Teacher cited policy and punishment, went to union rep first, and then principal, no parental contact. Some of the things we discussed, are there underlying factors at the school? Where was the due process? Should an assignment be worth more than exam, which we have talked about? And once again, where is that parental contact? I feel like that is part of the due process. As a teacher, I feel like you have to contact the parent, especially with this situation where she's going to fail him for the year. So go to the next one, Ashley. All right. So some of the underlying factors, principal can overrule. He has that right as the principal to assign the final grades. The due process was not followed here. Has it been followed in or not followed in other situations? Is there something going on either with this teacher or within this school that the principal really needs to look at because the due process was not followed? Is he setting himself up for other legal situations? Fail the assignment but not the class. Is he aware of the grading in his school? I think Dr. Caton said that she is aware of at least each department's grading. And I feel like as a principal, you should be aware of how teachers are grading within your class. This was an interview. I'm a CTE teacher. An interview with somebody is not going to pass or fail a student for the semester. I think there's a breakdown in communication at this school between the teacher and the parent. the teacher and the principal. And I think communication is key. It's something that is apparently very lacking in this school, and at least with this teacher, for whatever reason. All right, go to the next slide.
I'll go ahead and start talking while it switches over.
Okay.
So the next one is talking about substantive versus procedural. And so like we were saying earlier, that substantive just talks about like the rules and the regulations that are established by the school board and those policies. But this being procedural is failing Bobby for the whole course really fair. Would this be a requirement that they had for all the students? Like we were talking about with zero tolerance policy, it needs to be written in a way that the school's district's credibility is not going to be damaged by enforcing such policies. In this particular policy, it was worded that with may instead of shall or will. So that leaves it open to the on-site school administrator to have some decision-making power, which is, I feel like that, you know, the dean of students went to him, and that was kind of where then I think he needed to step in, maybe more so than what we could read in the case study itself.
Is this slide showing?
Yes, it is now.
It is now that I've kind of rushed through all that. I got distracted when it switched over. So again, that administrator has that decision-making power that they can consider the merits on individual basis, like we've already talked about with some of the double jeopardy stuff like that, that it's not set in stone there that anything's going to happen just because the teacher says that this is what's going to happen. Go ahead, Ashley.
Do you want to talk about the older brother?
You can hop it. One of y'all can.
Well, the next slide talks about arbitrary and capricious. And with arbitrary, based on a random choice of a personal whim, I mean, is she just singling out students? And you do have that question, does the policy state that all students are given this consequence? And then on the capricious side, you've got this, I think we all have agreed that she's acting on a whim, impulse, what she's done is pretty unpredictable. And the punishment is definitely more than what is allowable by law or by board policy. And then we all pose that question about failure for cheating. Is this reasonable? As the one in charge of the discipline, ensure you know the specific provisions of district zero tolerance policies, and then make sure you have all the facts that are pertinent to the situation, including any extenuating or mitigating circumstances.
I like the bottom part there where it says may. Please remember, as Dr. Caton said, the may means you could give them a failing grade on the assignment, or you can write a referral to the office. Some districts are pretty clear in that. Again, in Charlotte Mecklenburg, it's restorative justice. You would refer them to the office. You couldn't give them the zero. But what's important to remember there is you can't give them both. You can give them one or the other according to what your district says, but you can never, in any district, it may be clear here, no district is it allowable to give them both. That's the double jeopardy standard.
Like I remember now, Ashley was trying to rack my brain earlier. So like we were saying that this is capricious, where she's kind of doing this on a whim. The fact that she's had the older brother, was there something already there with the family at that point that she's possibly taking it out on the younger sibling? Did she like the older brother? Did she not like the older brother? Several things there, being maybe an older teacher since she's had some siblings. Is she just tired of athletes receiving what she considers special treatment? So we were just kind of thinking about whether any of those kind of things played into this situation as part of, like Larry was saying, making sure that we have all the facts pertinent to this situation.
And then like, how old was this kid? Like, really, was it going to affect his scholarship? Was she trying to intentionally do something like this to him? And also, like, how much time does baseball take up if she's like thinking that, all of her student athletes are not putting their student first of their student athlete portion. So that's kind of what we came up with on that.
All right, and then the next slide, we start talking about the justice, fairness, equity, and justice. All students must be held to a policy no matter who they are and who they are related to. Is it fair for a student to fail the whole course due to one assignment? This is something that I feel like after this situation is over, the principal needs to discuss this with this teacher, her grading policy. It's like Dr. Lamb said, I don't know if I'd want this lady on my staff either, because maybe she's just old and set in her ways and she's on her way out. I don't know, but she just seems, I feel like that she went over his head by getting a union rep before she even came to him. So I feel like that, I came from the work world, and that's one of the worst things you can do. And even at school, if you have a problem with a teacher, you should go to that teacher, then the principal, then the and go up the chain of command. And she didn't do that. Also, there's tiered punishment. So we use PBIS at my school. It has some very clear and defined reasons or consequences for levels of punishment. And so, with this, he would probably still get the 0 and a day or 2 in ISS, and then it would be over and done with. There would be no summer school. There would be no losing of baseball, where that double jeopardy comes into play. Now, she did have reasonable suspicion, and Bobby admitted fault. However, this is the capricious, we follow policy, but do so without overexerting the power.
Oh, look, it changed quick that time. Yay.
I know.
The next one's just talking about care, loyalty, and trust, being consistent with policies in school, obviously, because you want to have that trust from the school and the community. But then also you just got to think about that fairness portion. Like Dr. Lamb was saying, that communication is key. In our school system this year, or our school, our principal made sure that we posted on all of our Canvas pages, because that was the first thing that kids saw with all the hybrid learning and those kind of things. Even if we had put it in a syllabus, he basically was like, post your policy everywhere. It just needs to be out there with that communication. Concern and connection, decisions helping the student understand their priorities. Like other people have already talked about, being a student first, athlete second, but making the time to have that conversation with the students, show that concern, show that connection with them. Nurtured, encouraged versus achievement. Obviously, this should be a learning thing for Bobby at this point, and not a life-ending, life-changing event. But take that chance that all actions have consequences, whether it's a positive action and a positive consequence, or a negative action and a negative consequence. Relationships, consulting with that teacher, like we've said, collaborating on the punishment, as opposed to her coming in and saying, you are going to uphold this policy. Discussing those policies with teachers. Sorry, heads are cutting it off down there. And then attention and support. All actions have consequences. I already said that part. Sorry. Next.
In our next slide, we talk about critique. We move on to talk about possibly corrupted morals, with Bobby, cheating, copying his brother's work, ethics takes over where the policy ends. And then, we did talk about where the principal must uphold the policy, or he's going to lose credibility with his staff or people involved. However, the policy is written may be too stringent and leave room for some type of interpretation or leniency. I think it comes down to what we had here, where we put power down, and the teacher must not overuse power, which obviously she has. And then we talked about this last week about the principal, he'll use his authority when unfair grades are given. One thing we did discuss was the social class part, where I guess his uncle, being the board member and being a person that contributes to the school, I'm an athletic person, so I was all about not making him upset. And then the incident, the offense type versus the action type. The action type could bring about athletic favoritism. And then that comes down to, what we've mentioned here a couple of times. Has a teacher had athletes before, had bad experiences, and she wants to make old Bobby pay for everybody's choices.
All right. And then profession, accountability for student academic and social success. All faculty and staff, even administrators, are responsible for student success and teaching accountability, integrity, and honesty. This is a place where the principal could talk to the student and, explain to him, or his coach, or the athletic director, the dean of students, somebody, you have to be accountable. You were. By him admitting it, he took accountability, and that's really hard for students sometimes to take that accountability. So he does need to be kind of given kudos that, you fessed up. Now let's move forward and let's learn from this lesson. Upholding policy, even though difficult, we require tough conversations, reflection for the principal. He probably, after this situation is over, he needs to reflect and then have some tough conversations, especially with that teacher. Equity is important. So if you treat Bobby different, will the next students be given the same treatment? So because of his uncle, which, at first we felt like this was very cut dry, but we didn't feel like it was cut and dry with what you were saying, Dr. Lamb. We felt like this is the policy. And the more we talked about it, we realized that this was cut and dry in a different way, that it was not that the teacher, that the principal should uphold the policy and the grading that the teacher gave the student. We felt like that we still don't feel like the uncle should come into play, but we do feel like that Bobby needed to be treated more fair. The communication was not there, and he was due his due process. And then if the policy is not upheld, other parents might become upset and you lose credibility. So like I said, it goes back to that reflective practice. After this situation is taken care of, the principal really needs to look and reflect and rewrite this policy, and then look at all of the grading practices of all of his faculty and staff.
Again, I'm going to be clear. This is not a policy issue. The policy is present.
This is the reflective, though, after he gets done.
No. The policy's in place. This is not about the principal rewriting the policy, or the policy's in place. The teacher chose not to follow the policy. That's what this case is about. Again, this is not about substantive. There is a policy in place. The teacher went outside of that policy. And so this is not on the principal to rewrite the policy. The policy is written for the principal by the state and by the Board of Education. The principal's job is to enforce the policy. The teacher the teacher went outside of that policy. What the principal has to do is address that with not the faculty, but with that teacher. That's the crux of this issue. This is a teacher problem. This is a procedural problem. It is not a substantive problem. There's nothing wrong with the policy. The policy stays as written. It does not need to be revisited. What needs to be visited is why the teacher did this, interpreted the policy or ignored the existing policy and went out on her own and made this decision.
Dr. Lamb, I think to clarify kind of what our group was thinking was that we needed to revisit this policy with the teacher so that she is aware where she was at fault.
Okay, I'll buy that one.
Just because, if she pulls the I'm not aware card, or hey, this is what this says. So that's why I think we were saying we need to make it more known to the teachers, like, hey, this is our policy. There's no flex in it. It is what it is.
Dr. Lamb, can I jump in?
Yes.
I get what you're saying, but this is so far beyond sitting down and reviewing a policy with a teacher. Last week, and I want to refer to something that one in your group just said that you thought it was cut and dry, but you realize now it's cut and dry in a different way. Last week, Dr. Lamb referred to this class as we're trying to help you change your lens. And when I went through my first administrative program, I joked and said that they were brainwashing us. That's how I would call it. I think changing your lens is it sounds much more edifying to refer to it that way. But that's what we are trying to do. When I interviewed for my first program, I am embarrassed to say that I said I wanted to be an administrator because I wanted to support my teachers. And I bet some of you are thinking the same thing. And the reason I'm embarrassed to say that is because that just showed how naive I was, and I did not have the lens of an administrator. This is not to say you won't support your teachers, but if you support this teacher in this case, you're going to be without a job and without a home. And we are trying to change your lens to get you to understand this isn't about not having a policy. This isn't about having to review a policy. This is not even about the kid cheating. What this is about is a teacher willfully broke the policy. She intentionally was trying to damage a child. Her reason is really irrelevant.
I think we may have mispresented ourselves because we totally hear that and agree with that. That's why we were saying, like, does she not like the older brother? Is she fed up with student athletes? So
right. And I completely get where you're coming from, but I need you to get to the point where that's really irrelevant.
Immaterial.
It really is when it comes down to it. You've got a teacher that could bring down, I'm going to change my language and just say a complete hailstorm on your head where you will not have a job, you will not have a home, you will not be able to support your family, because if you allow her to get away with breaking this policy, that's what it's about. It's not about any of this other. You got to get it down to the nitty gritty. And that's the nitty gritty, is that she broke the policy.
And we're going to fire her.
Well, that's not always easy either. That takes an act of God sometimes, but this is a point where you need to do everything you can to say this woman needs to be out of my building, and she really doesn't need to be working with children. So that's what that hit me as have been listening to you guys, is we are working with you to help you change your lens. And it's not your fault that your lens right now may be within the four walls of your classroom. That's where it's supposed to be. But now you're wanting to go beyond that classroom, and you need to be able to look at things from a more global perspective. You've got to protect your district, you got to protect your school, and you got to protect yourself. And when I say protecting your school, that means protecting your students. And when you've got a teacher who is willfully hurting students and willfully breaking the policies, then it's hard sometimes, but that's when you've got to step in and you've got to take control of the situation and do what's right.
One of the things I guess I should have stopped, because I know that in the past, when we've had teachers get in trouble for, like in our district or in the state, for texting students, and they've gotten in trouble for that, we are brought in and ad nauseum gone over the policy of why that teacher caused all of these issues. And so my reflection was that, does he not need to do something with that teacher? I get, but then he needs to make sure this doesn't happen again, or is not happening in his school, because we are brought in when things happen within the state, within our district or whatever, we're brought into a faculty meeting, and these are the things that are gone over. You may think you know the policy, but here it is, because our lawyers in our district make them do these things.
Right.
So that was my reflection part, is that, you know, shouldn't he make sure that this is not going on in other places? Okay, here, I'm bringing you in and I'm going to give you deal with that teacher. But here, I want to make sure my whole faculty understands that there's a grading policy in place. And I want to make sure you all know that. So the next time this happens, I can say, you know, we just went over this. So that was kind of my reflection part, is that he also needs to just revisit with the rest of his faculty so this doesn't happen again, so we don't all lose our house.
Right. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. A little CYA, a little reminding people. And, you know, none of us want to have to get that email. But sometimes as a principal, you're going to have to send that email. That's just part of the job. And even though you may not have done anything wrong as a teacher and you don't want to read it, I'm sorry, that's just the way life goes. But, you know, along with that review, you may want to just remind them, I'm the one who gives the grades. And if you break this policy, we're going to have a problem. I'm not going to have someone in my building that's going to willfully abuse children.
Okay, Cyrus had a question for Dr. Caton.
Sure thing. What you got?
Dr. Caton, I'm at a high school as well, and when you mentioned that your departments, that their grading practices are consistent internally, that's how ours are as well. But I guess my question is, after listening to everybody's talking points, does having, as a teacher, I like to have some manner of latitude in my classroom when it comes to grading, not being out of compliance with what the district and the school say, but in being able to say, you know, this is what counts as what, that sort of thing. But then from the perspective of dealing with an issue like this and preventing an issue like this, is that something that as a principal you would not necessarily mandate, but that you would bring up to your school improvement team as something to seriously consider implementing, so that it is universal across the board?
So we at our school have tried to implement universal. We cannot agree pretty much between social studies and math. That's the big holdup. We have gotten it pretty close, that projects and tests are the same, because, they want to, this is the same for everybody. Of course, homework is the same, classwork, but so social studies is a little bit different. But most of our departments are all consistent with everything. And I do that also because we're a small school, and when you go from teacher to teacher, I like it to be the same. Now for us, for our freshman academy, they're absolutely 100% the same, period, done. It is what it is. So because they are so intermixed with each other, that's what it is. So we are working on trying to do that in our leadership team. And I'll be very honest with you, it's my social studies department who is having a very difficult time with it. And we're working on that, so.
But please remember, Cyrus, the discretion that teachers have comes in not in how much everything should count and what counts, but you have discretion in what grade or what points you give for that assignment. That's where your discretion comes in. Just like I showed you the grading scale for this class. You've got 2,500 possible points. You've got 25 different assignments. Now, I can give you up to 100. Now, that 25 assignments is consistent all across 603 regular for master. That same 25 assignments is consistent, and they're all worth up to 100 points, and they're all the same assignments. Now, different instructors will assign different point values. I could give you a 90. I could give you a 95. I could give you an 80. That's where my discretion comes in as the instructor. Then when I put on my hat as the department chair and program coordinator, I have to set down, these are the 25 things that count. And this is how much they count for. It's up to you as instructor how much of that 100 points you want to give on each one of these. But now I have to set, according to the policy of the university, what 25 things count. They actually revert back to student learning outcomes. I have to go in and dig all this stuff out for each of these modules 601 through 5. How many points, what's going to count, how much should they count, have to do all the percentages. They're related back to the student learning outcomes that go back to the accreditors. That's the way that works. But now the discretion comes in now when I put on this hat as, you know, as the instructor over here, when I put on this hat, I get to decide whether I give you a 90 or 100. But I don't get to decide as an instructor which 25 will count and what the possible points are for them. So that's where that discretion comes in. And so, but that makes the policy equitable. And here's another thing, and this is just a personal note to all of you. Stop using the word fair unless you're going someplace in the fall of the year to ride the Ferris wheel and get a corn dog. There is no fair. We use the term equitable as professionals in this industry. The term is equitable. It's not fair. Fair is a middle school concept. Every middle school kid I ever heard whined about something wasn't fair. If you want to be seen as a professional, we use the term equitable. All right, who's next?
Hey, I got a question for you, Dr. Lamb.
Yes.
You know, we've been talking about state. What about private schools? Because that's the first thing I thought of when I read this little scenario. I'm like, it sounds like a possible private school type deal. I mean, if she's saying you failed my class, I mean, is that different?
That's a great question, Larry. So here's what I have to. Somebody asked me this question, usually about the first case study every semester in law. Is we're training you to work in public schools, period. If you choose to work in a private or charter school, that is certainly your choice. Many of the things that we teach you here will be consistent there as well, because they don't want to be sued either. Private schools and charter schools don't get a pass on being sued either. If you violate somebody's 14th Amendment right to equal protection under the law, you're subject to being sued and you will lose. And so private schools, they tend to manipulate a little bit more, but they get sued as well. I saw one that's getting sued in Charlotte right now. One of the bigger ones is getting sued right now, and they're going to lose that case because they absolutely did not give that kid due process. So these are best practices no matter what, whether you're working in a parochial school, a Catholic school, a Christian school, private school, or a charter school, or a public school. It doesn't matter. Many of these concepts for equal protection under the law, due process, they're consistent with everybody. And you need to understand that you must be equitable no matter what level of schooling you're in. You must be equitable. As soon as you treat somebody differently, you set yourself up to not only for a lawsuit, but to lose that lawsuit. That's what you've got to understand. And so the notion here is I can't keep you from getting sued. We're trying to keep you from losing your house, from losing the lawsuit. And you know, again, you're going to find out in number 5 or 6, you know, there's if you've not read it yet, tort liability. That means you can be sued as an individual and lose your personal property. The notion that the school district has insurance, they do for them, they don't for you. You are subject to lose your personal, your life, liberty, property. You are subject to lose any of those in a lawsuit. You got to remember that. So I would not, me personally, I would not operate any differently. And I do work in a private school. I worked 32 years in a public school. I've worked now. This is my 32nd semester teaching at Gardner-Webb. How old am I? I've taught 32 semesters at Gardner-Webb after a 32-year career in public school. I don't operate any differently in the private school because I want to keep both of my houses.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Smith?
Yes, sir.
We're rolling.
All right. I guess I'll share my screen. Make sure it's on the right thing. Okay. Yeah, percent. Oh, well. Okay. All right, Ryan, you are up.
All right, so the first thing we did was do a summary of chapter 6 and chapter 8. Some things may be repeated from other groups, but anyway, so we know that chapter 6 dealt with student discipline, which is a major component of classroom management for individual teachers and heavily involves principals and administration as well. One of the first things when looking at the case study was that the school policy said that he would receive a failing grade. Cheating results in a failing grade.
No, it said May. It said May. The case study said May. Remember that.
Okie doke. So it said May result in a failing grade. However, we also saw Bobby's uncle is involved in the community, the Board of Education, talked about all that. He was a star on the baseball team. Just looking at it from a holistic standpoint, and if he receives this failing grade, he will not be able to play during the summer. So the principal is kind of at a crossroads with this discipline. The superintendent told him the final decision is up to him, but he told him, hey, be reminded that, sorry, my screen's not on. Be reminded that Mr. Michaels is very passionate about sports and it benefits the town. Didn't really see much support there on my end from that. Hey, that was his take on it. The failing of Bobby could be considered excessive
Brian,
punishment.
let me interrupt again. Let's be clear again. When it says they may receive a failing grade, didn't mean that they could fail for the year. That would be a zero tolerance. That's not allowable. That can't be in policy. When they say they may receive a failing grade, it's on the assignment only. So that notion that, well, there's not enough information, you're supposed to know that. That's one of those things, if you know, I pointed out, and we had it in our literature, the zero tolerance policy, which means you cannot assign failing for the year for any reason. That is not a punishment that's allowable. When it says may fail, it's only for the assignment, not for the class or for the year, because that's illegal. That would never be written into a policy. So the notion here is he may receive a failing grade on the assignment, not for the year. That is not implied or in any way stated or implied that a one grade or one activity can fail you for the year. Conversely, the zero tolerance law says you can't do that. You can't fail a kid for the year over one assignment, period. So let's make sure we understand what zero tolerance means. All right, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Go right ahead, Ryan.
Okay, and the failing of Bobby could definitely be considered excessive punishment. And I think other people have mentioned that as well. He did admit that he cheated. And, you know, because of his accountability, perhaps another opportunity to complete the assignment with a certain percentage taken off would be a better solution than to just outright fail him, given all the ramifications that will come along with that, which Dr. Lamb just basically talked about. You can't do that. And basically looking at the fact that it will look like the teacher just doesn't care about the student. And if the principal goes along with that, it kind of signs like a co-signer. He says he doesn't care either. And certainly that's not the case that we want to depict here. The teacher doesn't seem to be concerned about these things, given the fact that she shows up with the union rep to a meeting. But the principal is tasked to look out for the well-being of all involved parties. And that was one of the things that Chapter 6 talked about. When you're looking at the discipline, you have to do it not just being concerned about the student, or not just being concerned about the teacher, or not just being concerned about the district, or not just being concerned about the parents. You got to be concerned about everybody, because you are the leader of the entire school and you represent the district, but you also are representation for your teachers, but you also have to take care of your students and you care about the parents. So the principal has to weigh, I said, on his moral or ethical balance, what is the best thing to do for the child, teacher, and his family, and ultimately his school. There are a lot of stakeholders in this in this decision. And of course, we've already mentioned that, she can't fail him for the whole class, this one particular grade. So, but those are just some things that I gathered from looking at Chapter 6 based on the case study. And America has moved me along, so that means go to the next one. Summary of Chapter 8. The chapter deals with academic issues and student records. This speaks directly to the case study at hand. I kind of read the no pass, no play statute. I thought that could be a strong leg that maybe the teacher could come from, but that would still be a halt because you can't fail the kid for the whole year based off that one assignment. I also looked at FERPA. So Bobby's parents, they have the right to access all his grades in the class. And if his grades, if all the other grades have been good and this is the only thing that is standing against him, would they be valid in their claim to ask for another opportunity? Sure, because if he's done all the other assignments and done well on them and only this one assignment, that for whatever reason counts so much for his grade, they kind of have a leg to stand on and say, hey, can he get another opportunity? Can he try again? Because why did he cheat? What was the reason behind it? Where there's some, I know this year with COVID, everything that all of our guidance counselors at my school have been talking to us about is, considering the children's mental state and everything that's going on at home and some of them are working and all these other things. So you kind of got to put all that into play. His grade reduction or failing has nothing to do with competency testing or the student's attendance, but it does involve student misconduct. But did the teacher review the policy prior to giving the assignment? That was one of the risk management guidelines that were in Chapter 8, reviewing these important policies before giving an assignment. Perhaps if she would have went over it again, maybe something would have clicked in his head, even though we all know he shouldn't have cheated. Maybe it would have sparked something to say, oh man, if I do this, if I plagiarize this is 40% of my grade, and she's saying that I'm going to fail the entire class. Then the other thing is, if this can't happen, which other groups have mentioned, how did it get this far? Why is it not? I think the first group mentioned this. How come this wasn't caught early on? This shouldn't have taken this situation to bring it to light. So, the parent, they have cause to question the final decision of the teacher, and the principal has got to be the final one to make the call, because as we've discussed, he's the one that has the final call on grades. So it falls on him, and he's in an interesting situation. But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, whatever decision he makes has got to be the best decision for all involved parties, not just the teacher. And it looked to me, based off what we saw, that the teacher was just more so concerned about what she was trying to do and not everybody involved.
All right, so the courts are going to look at due process two different ways, and that's going to be substantive and procedural. You can go to the next slide. So substantive due process just requires that the rules and policies be fair in and of themselves. So the school already had a policy saying that cheating of any kind may require a failing grade by the teacher. You can go to the next slide. If we look at this from a procedural standpoint, procedural due process requires that the policies, rules, and regulations be carried out in a fair manner. So when we look at the school's policy of cheating of any kind may require a failing grade by the teacher, that's what's in the school student handbook. It said that the parents had observed it, recognized it, signed it. I guess the question that would come to my mind is, what about the other students within that classroom? We're looking at this student. Are any other students in the classroom having the same issue? And then I also looked at, from the principal's standpoint, yes, the principal could still fail Bobby for the assignment only if the principal chooses to do so. The question would be, what is a realistic consequence for Bobby's action? Maybe be given a different assignment. And then it's also important to remember that Bobby is still a high school student. So you can talk to him like an adult as much as you want, but Bobby may be struggling with time management. He may have seen that the assignment was not a priority over sports. So a little bit of grace given towards Bobby would be important in that aspect.
Restorative justice.
Okay, looking at the standards of arbitrary and capricious, researching them, they're similar but different. Arbitrary is more about random choices, just doing something just randomly, and kind of taking like a personal random choice. And then caprices is, a sudden and unaccountable change of mood or behavior. Together, I found this in the Black's Law Dictionary. Together, they can refer to a willful and unreasonable action without consideration or in disregard of facts or law or without determining principle. And I like the way that you explained it last week. Being that arbitrary means, do we treat everyone the same, and capricious being given more punishment than the book allows?
I love America. I love Black's definition, from Black's law, a willful and unreasonable action without consideration or in disregard of facts or law without determining principle. That is this case. That's why I told you this case is about arbitrary and capricious, because that one sentence summarizes the whole of this case. That's what this case is about. This is what happened here.
Okay. And then relating it back to the case, looking at it through these standards, just like everybody else said, failing him for the assignment is fine. I guess when I looked at the policy, the cheating of any kind may require a failing grade. It's kind of, I guess I was thinking more of the lines of, well, the policy is not really clear, like, the verbiage of it could be argued. Like if the parent was to come in and say, okay, yeah, we signed this, but it doesn't say, you may require a failing grade, a failing final grade.
No, it can only mean the assignment. Again, zero tolerance law says it can't be for the year. So it can't be interpreted as, well, it says he may fail, but only that assignment. It doesn't have to say only for the assignment, because we know zero tolerance policy forbids us for failing for the year. That's not on the table. So the policy and the may gives you the choice of doing restorative justice, where you do an alternative assignment and a little punishment, or you can actually fail from that assignment. But you can't do both. You should not do both. That's why the may is there. Some districts outline that you must do, in certain terms of, I'll use again Charlotte Mecklenburg, you must do restorative justice. You cannot, you've got to give them the in-school suspension and give them a chance to make up the work. That's the policy, and that's how that's interpreted in that district. That's how it's carried out. But nowhere can it be interpreted in the United States of America. It cannot be interpreted that may receive a failing grade means for the year, because we have a federal law that says no tolerance exclusions are, and failing for the year is an exclusion, that those are illegal nationwide in any level of schooling. That is not allowable. That's why I said make sure you read and understand the federal policy on zero tolerance expulsions.
Okay. And then the teachers rush to fail him and then want the principal to uphold the decision, is also questionable. And I was looking at, is her decision based on the fact of who he's connected to, his uncle having all those connections, or, does the teacher truly understand the policy? Because, she just took it to the extreme. And then something the principal also had to look at is what would be the punishment for someone without the connections that Bobby had. When he was talking with the dean before his uncle was brought.
Erica, is she frozen for everybody, or just for me?